Just before we start, I had a sense while there was in this moment of worship where no one was singing and Harry was just playing guitar. And I sensed for some people that was quite an uncomfortable moment. And there was a challenge in that sometimes it is uncomfortable with God. And the reason it is uncomfortable with God sometimes is because he is challenging you. He's challenging something within you that needs to change. So if you felt uncomfortable in that moment, ask God why you felt uncomfortable in that moment. What was it that he wanted to speak to you in that moment that you didn't necessarily want to hear, but he might want to tell you? Anyway, we'll move on. I want to tell you a story to begin with. In October, me, Amy, and Judah decided that we would go on holiday. Now, we didn't really know what we were going to do. We didn't really, we couldn't find Airbnbs or anything like that. So Mike and Laura said, well, take the camper van. So we did. So the three of us packed the camper van, we got in it, and we drove all the way to the west coast of Scotland. Sounds idyllic, doesn't it? We drove to the west coast of Scotland and arrived in, I can't remember what colour it was, but it wasn't yellow, it was either amber or red. It was an either amber or red storm warning on the west coast of Scotland. So we had 80-mile-an-hour gusts, trying to set up a camper van that we'd never done it before. So my orienteering with Mike was done on his driveway on a Saturday in the calm. There was nothing, Judah was content. Amy wasn't there. And it was light. It was on a Saturday. We turn up on the west coast of Scotland in Oban. It is dark. It is raining. Judah has had a half an hour nap in the 8 hours that it's taken us to drive there. He's hungry. And Amy is not pleased. And then a couple of days later, we move on from there and we go to the north of Scotland, to a childhood place called Hopeman. Now, I'm sitting in Hopeman, and I'm saying to Amy, this is great, isn't it? This is fantastic. I could do this more often. I could do this more often. And Amy sits there and says to me, it's good. But how bad was it when we started? Just remember where we came from to get to this point. And this is what I feel Paul is saying to us here. He's reminding us of where we came from. He's reminding us of where we started from. He's reminding us that it's not because of anything we've done in our life that it's a lot better now. See, for me, it's a reminder of salvation. It's a reminder of my salvation. It's a reminder of, your salvation. And I wonder, how often do we take that for granted? Do we take our salvation now for granted? Oh, I'm saved. Oh, it's all right. It's okay because God's got it. Do we rest on our laurels sometimes? Because you see, without God or before salvation, we were deserving of his wrath. It says it there. Because of our sin, we were deserving of death. And when I was kind of reading up about this a bit and kind of looking through, I came across the word scapegoat. We've all heard the term scapegoat. So-and-so was made a scapegoat in this situation. Do you know where it comes from? Does anyone know where it comes from? It's really interesting. So, and you can read this. This is in the Bible, so it does come from the Bible, actually. It comes from Leviticus 16, if you want to read it. So back in biblical times, what they used to do is they used to have 2 goats. And 1 goat they would sacrifice, and 1 goat they would put all the sin and the iniquities of the community on, and then send it out into the wilderness. That was the scapegoat. You put all your sin onto it, and you killed the other one, but you sent the other one out into the wilderness. That was the scapegoat. But that was part of the older covenant, the old agreement that God had with his people. They had to do that. That was how they got rid of stuff. And if you want to read all the other things they had to do, read Leviticus. But Jesus came to fulfill that law, which he did when he died and rose again. And there enters salvation. See, it is by grace that you and I have been saved and are seated in heavenly realms. And when we talk about seated in heavenly realms, that means that you are knitted into eternity. You are knitted into eternity, which for our human chronological mind, it kind of doesn't quite fit, because it is outside of time, but you are knitted into eternity because of his great love. And this is good news. And you notice that it says, it is by grace you have been saved twice. See, for me, that reinforces it upon me. It reinforces upon the reader that it is by grace that you have been saved. Because I've had conversations with people that say, well, as long as I live a good life, as long as I give to charity, as long as I don't beat someone up or anything like that, as long as I, live a good life, it'll be all right. Surely that will count towards something in the end. It's fairly black and white here. That counts for nothing. It's very interesting that you might have seen it, there's a guy, a theologian, that's been on a Joe Rogan podcast. And the line he says to Joe Rogan is, if the Christian walk was based upon works, you wouldn't need God. If it was based upon works, you wouldn't need a God, would you? You wouldn't need God if it was based upon your works. And if we read in Matthew 20, Jesus talks of a man who hires workers to his vineyard. And he pays them equally. They each get the same payment. No matter what time they started, they each get the same payment, even if it was the hour before going home time. And my takeaway is from this is that when I read it, I always think this. It has nothing to do with the work that was done, but has everything to do with the invitation to come into it. Nothing to do with the work that was done. It has everything with the invitation. Because if salvation was by works, we'd be really upset, wouldn't we, when the person on their deathbed cries out to Jesus and you see them in heaven. If you lived your whole life as a Christian, you've done all this good work for Christ, and you see someone, when you get to heaven, if you see someone in heaven who 5 minutes before they passed had lived a terrible life but accepted Jesus, repented of all their sins, and you saw them in heaven, you'd be pretty cheesed off if salvation was based upon works. You'd be thinking, well, they've not done what I've done for God. How come they still get entry into the gig? Because it is by grace you have been saved, not by your own works. And the beauty of all of this is, when we accept Jesus into our lives, we receive the Holy Spirit, we have the good news that dwells within us. It dwells within us. And the beautiful thing is that it's not just dwelling within us, it's just more than this. See, if we look at the passage, life was pretty bad, then we're saved. But it doesn't stop there. We are his handiwork, created for good works which have been prepared in advance for us to do. This is where we can become a bit unstuck. Great news, but what is our response to it all? And often we go, well, he's prepared great works for me, but what are they? What are the things that he's prepared for me? And sometimes we stay there. I don't know, so I'm just going to stay there. You see, the thing is, God has prepared things for you. He's prepared good works for you. For I have come that you may have life and have it in abundance, is what he says to you. It's not just he's come to give you life. He's come to give you life in all its fullness, in all its abundance. And this isn't great news for us just to mull over and think, that's great. Although sometimes I think we do need to remember that we are the good news. As the church, we are good news. We need to remember that sometimes. But the great news is for those that aren't necessarily sitting here now. So there are people walking down out here now, walking around this building, who do not know the great news, who do not know that they were once kind of, you're looking towards death, but actually Jesus came to save them and to set them free and to bring them into the fullness of life. And the challenge is, what is your response to the good news that you've heard? Do you tell people or not? See, when I was thinking about this, I was challenged. So I have a 2-year-old son. I think he currently wants a snack. He's currently wandering around having a snack. And he is currently learning the world. He is learning how to navigate through the world as a 2-year-old. He doesn't know how to tell us when he's ill. We have to figure that one out for ourselves. But he does tell us when he's hungry. He tells us when he doesn't like something. But there will come a point in his life, and this is, every parent will go through this. There comes a point in his life where he won't need my everyday guidance in everything. He won't need me to tell him how to do things, because he'll figure it out for himself. He'll have grown up, but he'll know I'm close by. He'll know I'm close by. He's still my child, and he will always be my child up until he's 50 or whatever. But he won't need me to do anything. And this is the kind of walk that we have with Christ. So my dad reminded me, he says, we're called to be children of God, and we grow up as children of God, but sometimes we kind of remember all the childish things and don't do the adult things of God. A child growing up is like our walk with Jesus. It's like going through this passage. We start from nothing and we build through. And just like being a child or raising a child, it comes with challenges. You know, I don't think God necessarily looks down upon the world and thinks, this is all easy. I think he does look down on the world sometimes and think, if only they knew. If only they knew. But we have the good news, and we need to spread the good news. It was bad. It was very bad. We were looking towards death. Jesus came, died and rose again. Hooray, it is good. Now, get on with what God has prepared for you. Get on for what God has prepared for you. And if you're in a place where you don't know what it is God is calling you to, well, the good news is we're going to pray in a moment. But my challenge and encouragement to you today is don't keep the good news to yourself. You see, when we have good news at home, if we buy a house, if we buy a car, if we have a second child, we don't keep that news to ourselves. If something great happens, we don't keep that to ourselves and hide it away. You know, and then suddenly 9 months later, oh, I didn't realize you were pregnant. You've had a second child. You've had another, We don't keep that sort of news to ourselves. We share it. My encouragement and challenge is don't keep the good news to yourself. It's time for us to grow. It's time for us to mature in the things of God. You know, my son doesn't necessarily tell me the good news. You know, on Thursday, he told me all about the fact that he went through the car wash with Grandad. To him, that's not good news, because he doesn't like it. But when he gets older, as he grows in who he is, he will begin to tell me of good news that he sees at school, that he sees in his life. That's like us. We need to mature in the things of God. We need to tell the good news. So, it's over to you. Do you want to grow? Do you want to grow?